Sparking it off. What an experience. What an experience. All right, we got week 3. Mike and Rico going to do some college football breakdown. And what a day. Is a long one. Just got back from College Station. What a scene. What an environment. We're going to get heavy into that game. But just overall, what were your thoughts for the day, just in its entirety?
I think there was a lot of teams that had some surprising battles that we didn't anticipate. Clemson was 13-6 in their game, during that game, and then they really clicked it in late. They got it going. Arkansas damn near lost to Missouri State, which was crazy. So there's a lot of games in there. Florida almost got beat by South Florida, unthinkable. I never thought that game would be that close.
Yeah, that's absurd.
And so there was a lot of teams that I think we thought were going to roll, and they really struggled in the games tonight. Saw a lot of those. Texas struggled after having that really tough battle with Alabama. We talked about that. When you're coming off tough games, it's really hard to get your guys refocused. And a lot of the game, they were losing. So came back, they got the job done. But a lot of these guys had scares. I think that's the biggest takeaway from this weekend is a lot of teams had scares that they found a way. Arkansas found a way to win. Clemson found a way to get it going. Gators barely squeaked out and survived, a big upset from South Florida. So, and then same thing with Arkansas, found a way. So I think that was the big takeaway. I think the teams that we knew were good, Georgia, obviously Georgia and Michigan, they both rolled. They looked damn good. Both of those teams looked like two of the top teams around the country. They certainly stood out. And then and then we finally had a finale with this game tonight. And I think we'll dive into that a little bit. But that's kind of the takeaway. I think there's a lot of teams we don't know. Yeah. Just how elite they are.
It's a lot of unknowns. It's early. It's only week 3. Week 4 for those teams that participated in week 0, which was only a few of them. And just the college football landscape is starting to take shape. It's starting to form. And we'll start off with the first game. I think a unanimous number 1 team in the country right now for you and me. Not to say that that's how it's going to pan out in the end, but right now, Georgia looks like the number 1 team in the country. We watched a good portion of that game. Biggest thing that I'm noticing is that Stetson Bennett looks like a different dude. He looks much more comfortable in the pocket. He's making plays. He's got a moxie. He's got a little bit of a charisma about him now that he did not have last year. Looking at his numbers, went 16-23, 284, 2 tutties, had another touchdown on the ground. He looks really slippery. He looks really elusive. And Georgia, to me, Brock Bowers is, in my opinion, the best tight end in the country. And they might have 2 or 3 other ones that are as good as anybody else. Just real quick, Georgia, what'd you see from them?
Just dominant. They went on the road against, what looked to be a tough environment at South Carolina. Mm-hmm. They just jumped on them early. I think got up 24-0 and just coasted and just really were never really threatened in that game at all. It just felt like they were in control. And they did whatever they wanted. They got whatever they wanted. Doing the Brock Bowers a lot. They ran whatever they wanted. Their running backs got what they wanted. And then the defense was just suffocating. And, Rattler just couldn't do anything throughout the whole day. So that's why we've always mentioned these guys at the top, because they just, every time you watch them, they look so dominant. And we talked about this before. There's just, especially what we mentioned at the outset about Florida, there's just not a lot of teams in the SEC East that's going to really challenge them outside of Tennessee, which I think could be an interesting matchup. But I still think they would win that game, but I just don't think there's a lot of challenges in the SEC East for them.
No, I don't. And I know South Carolina goes out and makes a big financial investment and acquisition in Spencer Rattler. And we talk about this now because the NIL era. So it's legit to talk about. I think Spencer's value is $1.4 million. 13-25, $118 and 2 picks, no touchdowns, quarterback rating 32.5. One of the reasons why I think NIL is a problem and it's overvalued and overhyped. I mean, that's a big money guy who is doing nothing on the big stage there.
Yep.
And this is one of the things. I mean, that's a controversial topic, but yeah, Spencer Rattler was once considered a first-round draft pick, I think a couple years ago, going into last year, and he's fallen so far off right now. South Carolina really couldn't get anything going. They scored a touchdown, kind of a mercy touchdown. It was one of the last few drives of the game, and that ended up being the score there. 48-7, Georgia rolls. That leads us into Bama. We didn't see any of the Bama game because we were in College Station. 63-7. Bama got out 28-0. It's 28-7 or 35-7 at half, and then Bama puts up 28 points in the second half. They roll. Bryce Young, 13 of 18, 236, 3 tutties. Bama is going to be the team that I think challenges Georgia in the end. I think Bama's going to come out of the SEC West. That just looked like they're on a collision course for right now. Bama escaped Austin very, very fortunately, I will add, last week. But, yeah, when you're looking at Georgia, you're trying to think which teams can line up and bang with them for 60 minutes. Bama definitely can, definitely has, and I think that Bama will get the opportunity in Atlanta.
They will, and the one place they can attack Georgia is Georgia doesn't really rely heavily on the receivers, so the receivers don't really jump out to you. But Brock Bowers definitely jumps out at you, and I mean they're going to have to find a way to get a receiving guy to really go, because we've seen Georgia run on a lot of these teams, but you're going to have a lot of struggle running against Alabama because they got dudes up front, and that's going to be an interesting game because of the prowess they have in the trenches and on both sides of the ball on their line. So that's kind of the game you circle, but that's not for a long time because they ain't going to play each other to the SEC title game.
Mm-hmm.
If they get there, and like we said before, Georgia doesn't have really much competition outside of Tennessee. Maybe Kentucky, maybe they'll give them a little game, but outside of Tennessee, who I think could score in match them as far as offense, defensively they don't match up to what Georgia is. So, yeah, Georgia's kind of the cream of the crop, and my number one, just based on what I see from the eye test, they just look phenomenal. We know Alabama's Alabama, so they're going to be ready to play. That's going to be the matchup everyone's circled. So, still the same thing. We saw Alabama played a team they were supposed to humiliate. They did, Louisiana Monroe, and now we have to see kind of what Alabama's going to do during the regular season. Because Alabama does have some games like with Arkansas. They got some games that could test them, whereas Georgia, I think it's kind of
Georgia's going to roll.
Coasting for a while.
Yeah, Georgia's going to roll. That takes us into a couple other games. We'll go out there to the heavyweights in the Big Ten. I'll start with Michigan because I think Michigan's the best team in the Big Ten, the third best team in the country, even though they're ranked number 4. They blow out UConn 59-0. That game was 40-something. It was it was 30. What in the world was it? 39-0 or something at halftime. 42-0 at halftime. Something completely out of hand. They ended up sitting a lot of the stars in the second half. UConn's not a test. Michigan has not been tested yet this year. They played Colorado State, a decent program. Coach Norvell came over from Nevada and brought a new system and whatnot. So they were kind of finding their sea legs. Hawaii was not a test. UConn was not a test. Michigan has absolutely destroyed all 3. We're not going to know what this Michigan team is until a little bit next week with Maryland, but really when they go to Iowa.
Yeah.
But they look the part.
Yeah, they play Iowa on the road, and then they play Penn State later at home, which had a really impressive win over Auburn. Yeah, give them a shout out. That was a
That's the most impressive win of the day.
It was. They went in there and Auburn and just beat the crap out of them. And so that's going to be a good, nice test for Michigan. But yeah, I mean, Michigan, they got their quarterback, and as I tell Rico all the time, they've been missing an explosive playmaker quarterback, and it's just different. It's dramatically different when you have J.J. McCarthy in there. It's just they look so much more explosive. He can run the ball. He can throw the ball. He can tack you. You have to prepare for him as a runner. You have to prepare for him as a passer. And Blake Ford had a hell of a day. Had 5 touchdowns. So I mean, they're even though they're overpowering their opponents, you can see just how explosive this team's going to be. In the Big Ten, yeah, they look like the best. I mean, they're the most balanced group. But we talk about the offense, but the defense is just they just shut everyone down that they play. They're much more deep on their line, defense line, and then their linebackers and are bigger, but also their secondary. It's really just massive change based on what we saw a year ago. So they're going to be tested until they get to that Iowa game because they're probably going to do the same thing to Maryland next week. They'll probably beat their brains. And so, that team's rolling, and I think that team's kind of solidified, that third spot right there behind, Alabama and Georgia.
Yeah, and we don't really need to roll through the stats because they're pretty gaudy. Same thing with Ohio State, although I do think Michigan's defense has been consistently a little better than Ohio State. Ohio State dropped 77 points today. C.J. Stroud had 367 and 5 TDs, just video game stuff. Buckeyes had the big win over Notre Dame. Notre Dame's obviously struggled since, and Notre Dame almost lost to Cal today, but they did get the win. Coach Freeman got the win over Cal. We're not really going to know how good the Ohio State team is really until they get into the meat of the Big Ten play. I think Ohio State's going to be there at the end. I think Michigan's going to be there at the end. I think those two meet in Columbus. That takes us down to Clemson and Oklahoma. Clemson, another ho-hum performance. They drop 35 points in the second half, win 48-20 over Louisiana Tech. They just don't look very good. They just don't look very sharp. And good is relative because we expect top 4 championship caliber from Clemson. It's what they've been the last 5-7 years. And they just don't look that right now. I just no other way to put it. They just don't look like championship caliber team. I don't have them in my top 5.
Yeah, they just don't look sharp. I mean, they've done this every game. I mean, I think people see the score and they're like 48-20. Mike, what are you talking? We all talking about this a lot. Yeah, but it wasn't. It was close. DJ with another ho-hum day with 221 yards. It's just their average performance. They're not like you're not getting dynamic play from the quarterback position, and the young guy, Caleb Clubman, is probably not ready for that stage yet. So they're kind of just a mixture. Obviously, Will Chipley seemed to have a really good day, over 138 yards, 2 touchdowns. But that score was 13-6 in the second half.
Yeah,
I mean, that's a problem when you're playing a team that you severely overmatched against. And, it's been kind of a problem what we've seen Clemson in the first 3 weeks. Granted, they're winning, but they're not dominating opponents that they should be dominating, that they have better players than. So, I mean, they're just like, we're not going to know about Clemson until, they get around to that Florida State game, and then they have to come to Tallahassee, and then it gets serious. But right now, I mean, their offense is just kind of, there. They're hitting at moments and flashes, but they're not doing what you're used to when you watch Clemson. Definitely not doing what a top 5 team should do when they play an opponent like that.
No. A team that did not have a problem today, and they were playing an emotional setting in Lincoln. The Oklahoma Sooners looked pretty doggone good. They went out there 49-14. We saw that game pretty much through its entirety. Dylan Gabriel was decent, 230, 2 TDs in the air, had a big scramble for a touchdown. Nebraska actually got up 7-0, looked like they were going to come to play, and Oklahoma just kind of beat them to sleep from there. Oklahoma didn't even score in the fourth quarter, still won 49-14. I think this Oklahoma team has probably 90 cents on the dollar of offensive potency, but they're a completely revamped, different defensive ball club with Coach Venables. I think this Oklahoma team is really good. I have them in my top 4 now, and I think they're probably going to roll and win that Big 12 again with the injury to, the quarterback at Texas, Mr. Ewers. So I'm pretty high on this Oklahoma team. They've been impressive to me.
Yeah, we talked about how there's going to be some games where their offense isn't clicking. Well, it was today. Obviously, Dylan did his thing, and then, doing it on the road. I mean, we know it's Nebraska team that's really going up through a lot of turmoil. But still, just to do it on the road in a rivalry game, that moved them past Clemson for me. I mean, I got them ahead of Clemson because it's just I see an explosive ability out of Oklahoma that I don't see in Clemson, and I think you have to have them ahead of them because it's just kind of like they're doing everything that you expect them to do, and their defense is really standing tall. They're really making a statement with their defense.
Yeah, moving on to USC, a game we didn't see. This was a nightcapper. It was 21-10 at halftime for SC. Not a very impressive half of football, playing Fresno State at home. They did end up outscoring them 24-7 in the second half to get a 45-17 victory. Pretty resounding victory there overall. Caleb Williams had 284 and 2 touchdowns. They're just kind of plugging along. This SC team seems like it's finding its legs. Offensively, they're potent. Defensively, they're a little ho-hum. It's a little different brand of football out there out west. A lot of West Coast offense, a lot of passing and points kind of being scored in bunches there. But I got my eye on this SC team because I know what type of offensive firepower that they're going to have. And this is a team where if they can avoid that, trip to Corvallis where they drop a game, or a trip to Seattle where they drop one to the Huskies, one of those kind of weird, quirky environments. If they can get into November unscathed, I think this team is going to be really confident, be a problem.
Yeah, offensively, they should be up there. I mean, offensively enough, they should be ahead of a lot of teams because they're going to score points with Caleb Williams. I mean, the guy's too good not to, and obviously we know what Lincoln Riley does with offenses. So certainly, I think offensively they should be fine. Obviously, they're playing the Pac-12, which ain't good, and so that'll help them a lot as far as put up some gaudy numbers. And we're really not going to know how good they are since they don't play a lot of national matchups. Notre Dame was supposed to be one of their big national opponents, and Notre Dame, while they gutted it out and found a way to get a W, they just weren't. They're still trying to figure stuff out. So it's hard time seeing, Notre Dame being a quality opponent for helping them with that kind of schedule they have. But right now their offense is cooking, and you got to have them up there high.
Yeah, we got them up there high. I think they're going to be there at the end in the Pac-12, but we'll see. We'll see what the record says. It's kind of a team that would probably have to have a 0 next to their name coming from that conference. Oklahoma State rolls today over Arkansas Pine Bluff, 63-7. This is a team that looks pretty good early. Again, it's early, and it's in the Big 12 where that's all going to sort itself out because they're going to have a date. They're going to have that bedroom game with Oklahoma, so we're going to know exactly what they've got. Really not a whole lot to talk about as far as that game. Didn't see it, and it was against Arkansas Pine Bluff, who they were always going to cook. So there's that. Kentucky over Youngstown State, 31-0. Something we talked about with Kentucky. They don't wow you on offense. They don't. Levis did have a great day. As far as statistically, he had 377 in the air and 2 TDs. They amassed 31 points, but that defense for Kentucky is pretty doggone good. Stoops got them balling. Yeah,
Stoops obviously known without all his teams. If you look at all his teams, they play defense well. They get after the quarterback. They force you to make mistakes. Their secondary is really good. Linebackers are always really good. Stoops does a great job as far as their defense, and they kind of just hit offenses when they needed to, and they certainly got an easy 31-0 win. I don't think we were expecting a close game there, but they took care of business. But the big concern with them was when you play the bigger dogs like Georgia, do you have enough firepower to hang with them? Do you have enough power to hang with the bigger boys? And that's what we have to wait and see.
Yeah, I think you and I both are on the side of no, they don't.
Yeah.
Team really struggled today.
Yeah.
38-27 Arkansas over Missouri State, but my goodness, Arkansas needed 21 fourth-quarter points in order to pull that out. They were down 27-17 before they scored those 21 points. Not sure exactly what was going on. I'm pretty high on that Arkansas team just in general. I think KJ Jefferson is going to be a big-time player and is going to be dangerous all year at 385 with 2 TDs. Don't know how much of that came in the fourth quarter because we missed that. But just looking at the box score there, that's pretty surprising. I know they've got a big game coming up against A&M and Jerry World. They're going to get their chance to kind of right the wrong, but they took a step back to me because this wasn't like a quarter. This was 3 quarters of getting their ass kicked by Missouri State, and then they just rallied and ended up winning.
Yeah.
This is at home.
Yeah, we had those guys in our top 10. We were talking about, we're top 12 we do every week, and they were in there. And this was probably the most surprising performance out of anybody that's one of the top teams because they're playing at home. You would expect that they would be fine, but they were losing most of this game. I mean, the fact that they came back and won that game, is extremely misleading as far as the final score. It may look 38-27, like, oh, they just got a few touchdowns. It's like, no, they were down, and they had to rally in the fourth quarter to get those touchdowns and to make the margin kind of look good. But I think overall, not something we've seen from Arkansas this year. So that was very, disappointing game as far as their performance. And, maybe they're looking ahead of their schedule coming up, but I don't know. That was very surprising to see them struggle so much.
Yeah, so Arkansas, we had in the 10 spot. They are 10th as far as the AP poll. And then it's like you had a group of teams that were kind of hanging around that kind of were pretending to be top 10 teams. The first one was the number 11 Michigan State Spartans travel out to Husky Stadium in Seattle. They had lost 12 straight to Pac-12 opponents, make it 13 because they got their butt kicked out there, 39-28. Sparty drops 14 in the fourth quarter in a comeback. I think they scored 14 points in about a minute 30 to kind of make that look far more respectable than it was. That was a thorough butt kicking. Michigan State just, they are always tough. I feel like it's a program that really gets more excited to play people that they consider rivals or that they consider are bigger than them or maybe disrespect them than they do just maintaining a level of excellence for their own program. They just do this dip, and this was another dip performance. I get it. Going on the road and losing in close games, that can happen. But when you go out there and get pasted, they were getting pasted. It was 39-14 at one point, and then they made this big comeback. But that's unacceptable out there. You're paying a coach $10 million a year, and that kind of performance right there against an unranked Pac-12 Washington Husky team.
We kind of talked about this at the beginning of the year. I had my concerns just with some of the scores I was seeing from Michigan State at the start of the year. They had scoring droughts where and then they finally pulled away from these teams that they're so much better than that they should hammer. And, you see lulls in the droughts, and then finally they go out west. They have to play somebody on the road in a tough Washington environment. Washington's not near the program they have been, but it's the same thing we see from Michigan State when they usually face national matchups where they have to face somebody that they're not used to, and then like you just said, that score is not indicative of how it was. It was basically like 39-14, and they were crushing it. So they made it score look better, but it just wasn't that close to the game.
And so that's the number 11 team in the country. We talked about 10, Arkansas. Then we've got Michigan State at 11. So Arkansas is a scare. Michigan State gets their butt whooped. Now we got the number 12 team, BYU. Just comes off beating Baylor last week, and everybody gets all excited for this game. They go out there to Oregon and get slapped, 41-20. The game was never really close. Oregon jumped on them quickly, and it's a weird game because it's like when you look at the result, you want to give Oregon a bunch of kudos and you want to make them feel really good, but you can't erase that 49-3 loss to Georgia at the beginning of the year. So this really kind of has a double negative on BYU because it's like it's a loss, and it's a loss to a team that got absolutely crushed by Georgia. And so BYU, you've got this ranking up here at 12. It really feels kind of like a phantom ranking.
Yeah. Great
Great job by Oregon bouncing back. I know it's tough. You get a loss like that. It's easy for your kids to pack in. I think the coaching staff over there in Eugene has done a great job getting those kids ready to play again. They looked good today. They get the win, 41-20. I'm not sure that either one of these programs, Oregon and BYU, is really any type of contender, although Oregon should be able to contend out in the Pac-12.
Yeah, I think BYU was inflated because of who they beat. And a lot of their games, they were playing all in Provo, and Provo's a really tough place to play. Yeah. They rode the emotion. They got the job done against Baylor. But I didn't really sense, even watching their game, that it was like, okay, they're controlling the game. They're definitely just for sure the better team. It was kind of like, yeah, they look nice, but it wasn't like, they're just taking control of these games and certainly win on their own. So I think that ranking was kind of overblown of what they did against Baylor instead of what, that team they have returning, coming back. And Oregon responded, and you've got a nice win to kind of make up for that embarrassment of how they performed against Georgia. And, I'm sure they'll move up again, but it's kind of these early season matchups, it's kind of hard you got to not pay attention to kind of the rankings because some of these rankings are only based on one game, maybe at home or something. So it's a big win for Oregon. Great job bouncing back, and certainly we'll find out later what they are. They got some tough matchups with Utah and certainly USC. So that will kind of tell them kind of where they're at, but certainly a nice bounce back win.
Yep, so Oregon gets the job done in convincing fashion. Utah 35-7 winner over San Diego State. Good bounce back for Utah. Utah's kind of right back in the mix there at 14, and they're going to have a chance to move up because there's some mayhem in front of them. They're positioning themselves well. They're going to have a Pac-12 schedule to go ahead and get through, and they're going to get a chance to make some noise. It's going to be tough for them to get into the playoff because of the loss to the Gators. In a game they probably should have won if they execute better. But we'll see. It's a good bounce back from them. Got NC State, went 27-14 over Texas Tech. Not a great performance offensively from NC State, but that is a pretty strong performance defensively. The whole Texas Tech 14 points over 60 minutes of ball. Pretty doggone impressive. NC State looks like a serious threat to Clemson on that side of the Division ACC.
Yeah, they controlled that game. We watched this. Obviously, we didn't watch the game because we were at the Texas A&M game, but we definitely saw the scores, and they controlled that game most of the time. I think they jumped out their 20-0 lead, and then finally Texas Tech scored. Made it a little close, but it wasn't never in doubt. It was kind of NC State defense kind of really controlled what they wanted to do, so certainly a big win for them.
Yep, and now getting on to a team that you've been talking about. You talked about them during the offseason. You've been talking about them for 3 weeks. The Tennessee Volunteers, 63-6. Hayden Hooker looked good, 298, 2 scores. Here's the question. I mean, really, I think Tennessee is going to handle Florida when they play them in either next week or a couple weeks. I think Tennessee and Kentucky is going to be a really good game. I kind of favor Tennessee because I think they have more firepower. The main question is, can Tennessee give Georgia a game? Can they stay within 2 scores of Georgia?
And that's the thing. I mean, I think they'll give Georgia problems with that vertical passing game. I just don't think they're going to be able to do it consistently enough against that defense. We've seen the Georgia defense. They certainly can get stops when they need to, but we haven't really seen a team attack them vertically the way Tennessee will attack them. I love the Tennessee offense. I think they're going to be the biggest problem for them. I think it'll be a good test for them to get, going into the SEC championship mode, but I think overall they're the only team I see in that SEC East that's any challenge to Georgia, that they'll actually make them sweat and work a little bit.
Yeah, we're going to see. Tennessee's going to be locking horns with the Gators here in a couple weeks. That's going to be a good one. Moving on down, Baylor 42-7 over Texas State. A lot of smoke kind of lost. A lot of luster, I would say, lost for Baylor, given the loss that they had to BYU last week, but they did bounce back. It is a non-conference loss, so we'll see if Baylor Bears can bounce back. They did so today, 42-7. Ole Miss rolls Georgia Tech 42-0. We watched a little bit of that game. Georgia Tech is just not good, and Ole Miss may be a little bit better than what people are giving them credit for.
Yeah, Ole Miss is kind of like that dark horse in the West that nobody's talking about. That they haven't played anybody in the league yet that's really top notch, but they use kind of Luke Altmaier, they use Jackson Dart, and they kind of mix them in and out. So they're a team that's kind of a dark horse that we really just don't know a lot about, but we do know that they're a lot better than Georgia Tech.
Yep, and we know Georgia doesn't play them.
Yep.
So Georgia's just gonna roll. The SEC West is gonna have a little bit of a bloodletting, but the SEC East looks really weak outside of Kentucky.
Yep.
And Tennessee to challenge Georgia. I don't think Georgia's going to have much trouble with anybody over there. Moving on, Texas gets a win over UTSA, although it was a very hairy game. Texas had to play a really good second half to go by UTSA. They do so 41-20. Hudson Card is concerning. 15-23, 161, did have a touchdown. He doesn't seem to have the ability to consistently push the ball downfield. That's going to be a problem when they play the Oklahoma Sooners, who I'm high on. I think Oklahoma's going to pound them. So Texas, gosh, I hope Ewers can get healthy again soon because they look like a different team with Ewers.
Yeah, they do. And, you see that in the stats. He wasn't even the leading passer for the game. And they struggled mightily in this game, not just a little bit. That score is not even close to the indicator of, that game was like, UTSA was winning in the second half, a good portion of the second half, either by a touchdown or at one point 10 points. So they just, whether you can call it, we'll wait and see, but you can call it either a letdown from everything you put in the Alabama game, or they're just not that good of a team with Hudson there. So that I probably lean more towards the latter. That the latter of it is like it's an effect of Ewers not playing, because we saw Ewers when they were playing, and they had Alabama on the ropes when Ewers was playing. But with this guy, it's kind of like the offense is kind of taking a step back of they're very just methodical and not as exciting or explosive.
Yeah, whole lot of Bijan Robinson, 20 carries, buck 83, 3 TDs. That's kind of what you're going to see for Texas. I don't think that's a recipe to beat Oklahoma.
Yep.
It's probably not a recipe to do more than 8-4, 7-5. That's just the kind of the meat and potatoes of that. Texas is getting better, though. I was impressed with how they played against Alabama. Pittsburgh goes into Western Michigan. They win 34-13. They had a backup quarterback, looks like Nick Yarnell. Didn't throw the ball a whole lot, only 12 attempts, buck 79 and a touchdown. Pittsburgh is going to be a big challenge to try to come out of that side of the ACC, but man, that side of the ACC has not fared well. So we'll see. The ACC just seems a little down this year.
Yep.
Been down for a couple years, and that's why Florida State needs to kind of get their act together so they can bring some of those teeth back to the ACC, because right now they're lacking it. Performance of the day, in my opinion, I know we talked about this team. I was impressed with them at Purdue opening week of the season. Joey Porter Jr. looks like one of the best defensive backs in the country to me. I like this Penn State team. I think they're pretty good. They've got a 6-year quarterback and Sean Clifford, the big red dog. 41-12. They go into Auburn, 41-12. SEC. It just means more. Well, not today it didn't, because Penn State brought the wood, and they took it to Auburn. Absolutely kicked their ass, 41-12. This looked like an Outback Bowl.
It was a beatdown. Obviously, they had a great atmosphere there at Auburn. Crowd was pumped up, and then Penn State just took control of that game in the second half. They just could not generate anything on offense, and that's going to be a problem with Auburn all year. With TJ Finley, he just doesn't bring a lot to that quarterback position. I think he had a few turnovers, and they just don't. They're just a mess right now. Let's call it what it is. They're 2-1, but their program is a mess. Coach was almost fired before the year started. Now they're kind of figuring out what they are. They only know who their quarterback is. They switched. They were rotating Robbie Ashford and TJ Finley throughout the game. I watched a lot of this game, and they just seem like a team that's in total influx and just seem to be falling apart.
Yeah, we're gonna see. They're gonna have to pick this stuff up, or it's gonna be a long season. The SEC is pretty relentless, especially the SEC West. So Auburn better pick it up, or they're going to be left behind. Surprising game today was almost a loss, almost a really big upset. Wake Forest denies a 2-point conversion from Liberty to escape 37-36. It's relevant because as Knowles, we're really looking forward to this game in a couple of weeks against Wake Forest. Probably going to be without Jordan Travis starting quarterback, and you kind of ask yourself, can you beat this team? When you see Wake play like this, Florida State can absolutely beat this team, and probably should beat this team.
Yeah, and it seems to be the same problem with Wake as it was last year. They can't stop anybody, no matter who they play. And so, they're just not as good from the defensive side of the ball, and it's really hurting them. So I think certainly that's a game that looks more winnable than what we had originally thought when you watch Wake Forest the last few weeks. But, they're definitely looking like a beatable team, and certainly a team that I would say in the top 25 is probably shouldn't be in the top 25. Just because I don't think they're good enough to be in that quote-unquote 25 best teams, when you look at what they're doing.
Yeah, they're really struggling right now. Wake's going to have to get it together soon because the schedule's going to stiffen up. Now we're going to go into the last portion of the show. We're going to talk about our in-state teams, talk about the Gators, talk about the Canes. Florida, one of the most disappointing performances of the day. They're coming off of a loss against Kentucky. They're back in the swamp. They played 3 straight games in the swamp. AR-15 got a lot of love after the first game against Utah. He looked pretty solid, looked dynamic. Did not look solid or dynamic yet. Last week against Kentucky looked terrible. And today looked even worse.
Yep.
The Gators do win the game 31-28 because USF botched a snap and missed the kick and did things that USF-type teams do down the stretch. But AR-15, 10 of 18, 112 yards, and 2 picks. On the ground, 24 yards. So a lot of hype surrounding him, a lot of hype. When you have a star quarterback, usually the team gets inflated. The Florida Gators should not be ranked. They're not a top 25 team. They haven't looked like that for the last couple weeks. And they've got a lot of work to do. I know they're fully invested in AR. I think he's a dynamic athlete. I think he could be a really good player in that league. But he needs a lot of work because right now he is not seeing the field well. He's a turnover machine. And, no touchdowns accounted for and 2 picks.
It's just, thing is, he's just not a good passing quarterback. That's what it comes down to. These 2 teams that played him, obviously I know Jeff Scott very well. I know how he produced him. He was at Clemson, the way he prepares. And I guarantee you they just used the blueprint of what Kentucky ran last week. And they're forcing AR to throw the ball. They're bracketing people around him to make him so he can't run all the time. He only had 24 yards rushing. So teams are forcing AR to beat them throwing the ball, and he just can't do it because he isn't good enough. He's not a great passer. People that are holding hope that he can pass the ball, it ain't there, guys. It ain't there. He's not a great passer. That's just something you're going to have to deal with. They're going to have to matriculate stuff that works for him, that maybe is a mixture between running and passing. But if you're looking for him to be just all in some great passer, that's just not happening. That's just not his game. That's just not where he's going to stand out. And Florida's really trending in the wrong direction. It was almost one of the most embarrassing losses for the whole day. If they would have lost that game, that would have been really bad. So Florida's got a lot of work to do. I don't think that's a top 25 team. I think that's a team that is certainly in flux and has to figure out a lot of stuff going on. And certainly is a team that they've got to figure out some stuff because what they're doing is not working.
Yeah, I'm circling it right now. I knew that Tennessee game was coming up, but I didn't realize that it's next week. They're at Tennessee next week. I don't think that game's going to be close, I'll be honest. I think that's a 2-score win for Tennessee. I think Tennessee is on a different level than the Gators, and that's going to be a tough place to play. Florida's had some good luck against Tennessee the last 10 years or so, probably even dating back 15, 20 years. I don't think it's going to be a lucky day for them next week. I think they're going to get their butt kicked.
That's going to be bad.
Yeah, I think they're going to get their butt kicked. So the schedule's going to stiffen up on them. You look down the line, you still see games against LSU, although it's home. A neutral site with Georgia, not going to be fun at all. That's not going to be a close football game. And then at A&M, I don't see them winning that game either. Yeah. And then they've still got the South Carolina and at Florida State. I think Florida State's going to fare very well against them at home as well. So the Gators right now really are in a precarious position. They got to get this thing squared away with AR. They got to get that ship righted, and they've got to get on the right track. And I'm not sure that next week's going to be a chance for them.
It's just trending bad. When you're struggling against South Florida, that's really bad because that's a team that's still young, trying to figure out what they are, what their identity is, and you're struggling in the swamp against a team that really hasn't played good against anybody. If you look at their schedule, South Florida hasn't played good, so that's not a good trending direction for Florida when you're going into the Tennessee game and kind of the rest of the league. Because pretty much if you lose the Tennessee game, you're going to be out of the SEC East race because that means you haven't lost to Tennessee, you haven't lost to Kentucky, and basically you have one coming up to Georgia, which is probably going to be a loss. So, you're probably not going to – it's probably going to be over for the SEC East if you lose next week.
Yeah, I think that it will be done. If that, in fact, goes down the way that you just said it will be over because I don't see this Florida team beating Georgia. That brings us to the big one. We were there. We were in College Station. We were in Kyle Field. Hell of an experience. Thank you to Coach Fisher for extending and rolling out the red carpet to some Noles that know and love him so. And that staff has been very, very kind and gracious to us. We got to check out A&M. Got A&M stuff on. We were rooting for them. It was an awesome experience. Just before we get into the stats, just to anybody who may be watching this, what would you rate the overall just experience, the environment? I mean, that was truly awesome.
Yeah, I mean, that's my first time being there. I've never been to Kyle Field before, and certainly, we got everything worked out. But the experience itself was phenomenal. Saw like 60 horses in the pregame.
Yeah,
saw all kinds of stuff. The stadium is phenomenal looking. Upper decks everywhere. Sound is so loud in that place, and the environment was really good. The atmosphere was tremendous, and the offense wasn't tremendous in the game, but the game itself, as far as the emotion and the atmosphere, certainly was very sticking throughout the game. I mean, you certainly felt the electricity in that place as far as the atmosphere goes.
Man, the atmosphere was truly awesome. Yeah, it's hard to really put into words just the decibel level, man. That place is loud. I mean, Doak Campbell gets loud, and the big house gets loud. Obviously, Clemson gets loud, but that's a different kind of loud in Kyle Field, man. It's like that noise has nowhere to go, and it just sits on you. The sound system, they've got 1.5 billion different, like, predetermined yells. You got to go to class or a school to learn them all. But, man, they really piped some noise in there, and they really kept that thing live. Looking at the stats of this game, the Aggies come out 17-9 winners. A very sloppy offensive game, but not in the terms of turnovers. It's just execution. A&M had a couple opportunities to really kind of put it away and just couldn't pick up big first downs. They didn't really dominate the line of scrimmage. I thought Miami competed really well, particularly on the interior lines on both sides. I think Miami did a better job gap controlling, and it really kind of shows when you look at the stats. You look at the total yards, this was kind of a butt kicking. I mean, 392 for Miami, only 264 for A&M. A&M was breaking in Max Johnson as their new quarterback. They went away from Haynes King after the debacle last week with Appalachian State. They make the change there, so you expected the offense to be a little bit stagnant. But this is really the third game in a row where A&M's offense has really struggled. And I know Coach Fisher is a perfectionist, and I think that he may just be a little younger on this offensive side of the ball just as a whole. And it's really starting to struggle. They only had 264 total yards, only had 140 passing the football, and only had 124 running the football, 3.9 yards a carry.
Yeah, I didn't realize the stats were so what they were, but at the same time, some of that's kind of misleading when you look at it because you're like, well, how can they equal out to 17-9? Well, here it is. 2 field goals missed by Miami. One was blocked, and then one was just flat missed by Miami. And then they had a muff punt in the first half, which Texas A&M turned into points off turnovers. Jimbo's going to make you pay. Made them pay. Jumped up 10-3. Bam. That's kind of so. There was certain situations in the game where, I thought overall just the officiating was horrible. And in this game, the reviews of the non-pass interference to guys ball hitting the ground and the referee not reviewing it. Pass interference, 2 crazy, ridiculous targeting calls that got 2 guys tossed from the game for Texas A&M when they're already shorthanded with 2 guys that are already suspended. So it's like,
well, 4.
Yeah, it's like basically 4 guys out, and it's like so that's where the lackluster of the numbers come from. Certainly, their offense was much more fluid than the first 2 games I saw with Texas A&M. It was just bad where they just weren't staying ahead of the chains. They were doing too much stagnant runs on first down. They weren't getting yards on first down, and that really hurt their production as far as, as you see the 27-16. But at the same time, those numbers equal it out when you look at the muff punt and then also 2 Miami missed field goals, but also some officiating of calls led to Miami getting those 9 points they have. Probably 6 of those points are led because of some of the calls that were made. So you hope that doesn't continue for the future of these games, that these guys got to put better people out there that either review it or make sure they get it right. But certainly in certain ways, sloppy game offensively from both sides. Miami just really could not tack the middle of the field. Everything they did was on the edge, and then really just struggled to get consistently. Even when they got close, they never really seemed like they were threatening to score touchdowns. It was mainly just field goals. So just one of those low-scoring games where two teams are – I think the main thing, two teams are trying to find the identity of what the hell they can be. So I think we saw Texas A&M, even against App State when they lost. They're trying to figure out what they are. I think they got the right quarterback finally in there. Obviously, we met his dad before the game, Brad, which is pretty cool.
Brad, OG no.
And then, they kind of figured out what is going to work with them. It's a work in progress still, and then when Miami, they got to figure out how to generate something out of their passing game. TVD looks worse than what I saw last year. He just seems uncomfortable, whatever they're running. Seem to be running the ball a lot more than what TVD's used to, and then he just doesn't seem comfortable with what they're doing. So all this leads to a big Texas A&M 17-9 win. Probably should have been a lot worse than that, but they got the job done.
Yeah, we run through the numbers. You kind of thought Max Johnson would have kind of a ho-hum day, being that they weren't going to put too much on his plate. He was going to be asked there to manage the game. He only throws the ball 20 times. He hits 10 of them, 140 yards and a touchdown, kind of a ho-hum day. He didn't have any turnovers, and I guess that was really the key. A&M thought that they could really rely on their defense and kind of control this game, and they did. They had 4 starters suspended, 2 in the secondary. Those guys didn't play off the rip, and 2 really terrible targeting calls. One was just absolutely asinine. The referee needs to be relieved of duty for making such a terrible call on the second one. So they're down 6 starters. You only get 22 starters, so they're out a good percentage of their starters. They still managed to get a 17-9 win. There's some issues that I saw with Miami in the first couple games, and there's some issues that I kind of, prescribed to them coming into this year. With Josh Gaddis coming from Michigan in a non-ceremonious fashion, we'll just put it that way. Speed and space is not Miami football. Miami football is power, play action. They got badass dudes on the edge that can beat you, and they don't have those badass dudes right now on the edge. Miami is not able to push the ball down the field and beat you deep. The regression is showing in Van Dyke. He goes 21 of 41 for 217, no scores. Miami fans are really, really pining and just clamoring for this team to return to that top 10, top 15 type of status. And again, this has to be really humbling for a proud program like Miami. You didn't score a touchdown. You got to score touchdowns to win games like this. Texas A&M didn't play well, but they scored 2 touchdowns. Miami went down and just kicked field goals. Made 3, had 1 block, and missed another. I mean, if you're not going to score touchdowns against teams that can put the pants on and tie their shoes, then you're not going to be back. You're not going to be of relevance anytime soon. And I think that's the rude awakening for the Miami Hurricanes. We've all had this in the state. Florida went down and dipped a couple of years ago. They were pretty bad, had to fire a bunch of coaches. Florida State's been a hot doggone mess since 2017. But Miami's got to realize, if they want to come back and get into this this group of college football programs that matter again, you've got to freaking score touchdowns. Getting down there and kicking all these field goals is not going to get the job done. It's not going to help you in recruiting. It's not going to show the progress offensively. And I get it that Cristobal wants to be tough and he wants to kind of show the growth. But, you sat back 41 times and threw the ball with Van Dyke in this situation. I felt like it kind of went against their ethos and the foundation of what they're trying to be. And I don't think that Miami is on the verge of being this top 10, maybe even top 15 team. I think Miami's better. They're better in the trenches. They did a good job matching Texas A&M on both sides of the ball, particularly A gaps and B gaps on both sides. But they do not have Miami caliber guys on the edge. And it's kind of wild to see it. They just don't have that.
Yeah, they don't have edge rushers. They don't have – their DBs aren't great. They have a few interior guys that aren't bad. They did a good job, containing the run for the most part. but they don't have have that, and then you have you have your strength for this team is running the football because that's what they do well. If Henry Parrish they brought in, Jalen Knighton brought in from last year, they had him returning, and they got away from that where they just had TBD throw the ball, and it's like, why are you throwing the ball when you don't have any receivers that are top notch that can really make explosive plays? So the whole game plan just really didn't make a lot of sense of how much they were throwing the ball. And if you think about it, they kicked 5 field goals. I mean, missed 2, but kicked 5. I mean, you're going to beat anybody kicking 5 field goals.
No.
And they just, like I said, they're still searching for what the identity that's going to work. And right now, they're a lot farther along or a lot farther back than I think a lot of people realize when you watch this offensive performance tonight. That defensively, yeah, they can make some plays against a team that's trying to find their identity themselves, but you can't be out there kicking field goals and throwing the ball 41 times when your offensive strength is supposed to be running the ball.
Yeah, so the Canes fall 17-9. I know there was a lot of just anticipation into that matchup just to see who could kind of step up and just really take the stage there. It was a beautiful stage. The environment was incredible. A&M obviously had the big letdown last week, but they step up. Jimbo got them ready to play. They were a little bit tougher than the Canes, and it showed. 17-9 is the winner. That wraps up the scores for this week, but a quick preview into week 4. We've got some good ones, Mike. We've got some really good ball games here. Clemson at Wake Forest in an early one. That's going to settle out a lot of that stuff that's going on out there in the ACC. That's a good one. Just running down the line here. Michigan State, you got Minnesota at Michigan State. I think Michigan State may fall out of the top 25. They're going to be way back there. Middle Tennessee State at Miami is going to be a good one because that team can score, and they're not going to come in there afraid. Miami is going to have to fight the disappointment of this game.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to have to get up because Middle Tennessee State is going to come in there ready to play. A big one out there in the SEC is Florida at Tennessee. I think Tennessee is going to win by a couple scores. I just think they're a better team. Texas at Texas Tech, that's always fun. We'll see what Hudson Card can do. I would like to say Texas would get that one. Notre Dame, I know these aren't ranked teams, but Notre Dame at North Carolina, to me, is a big one because you've got Coach Freeman. He's at 1-2 now. If he goes to 1-3, the seat starts to get a little warm, and they start questioning if they've made a bad decision.
Yeah, and they're starting to play a little better. I mean, they looked a lot better today than they have since the start of the year, since that first game. It seems like they're starting to click a little bit. So that's one of the more underrated games that we're going to track.
Yeah, and then looking at a couple others that stand out, Arkansas at Texas A&M and Jerry World. That'll actually be a neutral site. That's going to be a really good game.
Yep.
That's going to be a game that we have to really look at and see. Who's gonna be here for the long haul in college football this season. So that game there is going to tell us a lot. Then we've also got a Wisconsin at Ohio State. That's traditionally a really good game. Not sure how good of a game it's going to be this year because Wisconsin doesn't look like the typical strong Wisconsin side that they've been. But nonetheless, it's still a big marquee game. It's somebody that can tie the shoes and put the uniform on. So Ohio State, we're going to see what you got. We're going to see what you got. Looking down the list, nothing really else stands out. USC does travel to Corvallis, play Oregon State. Always a funky kind of matchup there when they go out to those weird Pac-12 places. And outside of that, that's really the marquee games. Our Noles are going to be home in a night game against Boston College. We will be there next week. So hopefully we will have some good news to share from there. If Noles get to 4-0, it would it'd be pretty incredible. I know it'd be at least for the first time since 2015, because that's the first time we've been 3-0. So we're going to see. Top 10. I'm going to roll it down, Mike. You tell me what you like and don't like, and I'm going to make a last-minute change on it. I'm going to go here. I've got the number 1 team in the country, the Georgia Bulldogs. I don't think there's much question for me. They look like the best. Bama is the number 2 team. Bama is not far behind Georgia, but I think they're a little bit farther behind them right now. I've got Michigan as number 3 team in the country. I really think that that's the most complete team up north, especially in the Big Ten. I think they can match Ohio State as far as offensive prowess, and I think they're on a whole different level defensively. That's just what it looks like to me. The number 4 team in the country, I've got the Oklahoma Sooners. I know a lot of people a little low on them. I know it's been a coaching change, but I like what I've seen out of this Oklahoma team. I like them defensively. They went out there and they really took it to Nebraska in an emotional game that Nebraska really wanted to win. They just lost Coach Frost. Oklahoma beat them to sleep early. The number 5 team in the country, I'm going to keep Ohio State there. Ohio State had 77 points. They showed tonight Ohio State can score on anybody, anytime, anywhere. That offense is lights out. C.J. Stroud is a Heisman contender, possibly favorite. So I've got the Buckeyes at 5. Team at number 6, not far behind them, is USC. I love USC's offensive prowess. Their coaching, Caleb Williams. I love what they're doing out there in SC. Can they avoid the trap games that are out there in the Pac-12 against teams they should be bombing by 30? Mm-hmm. If they can, USC is going to be there. Number 7, I have Clemson. I keep moving them back because they're just not impressive. DJ Uiagalelei has not really been the quarterback that we thought he was going to be heading into last year, and he certainly has carried over this year. He's not been that impressive. Clemson, I've got at 7. I've got Tennessee at number 8 because I love what I'm seeing out of Tennessee. You've convinced me. I've watched them. I'm paying attention to them. I'm on board with Tennessee. I think Tennessee looks really, really good. I've got them followed up by Kentucky. That's going to get sorted out because those two are going to play. I had Oklahoma State at 10, but I'm going to switch that out, and I'm going to keep Arkansas at 10. And the reason is because I think Arkansas has the potency and the power and the hog mollies to match up with a lot of these other teams in the top 10. And I don't think Oklahoma State would beat Arkansas if they played. I know Arkansas played like crap today, but when they had to gas it up, they put 21 quick ones on the board in the 4th quarter.
Yeah, they have a better win. I mean, they have the better win out of it. If you look at their schedule, who they beat the week before. So I think they have a better resume than what Oklahoma State has right now. Oklahoma State will have a chance to move in there, but I agree with your top 10. I can't say I would change much in there at all.
So there we have it. We're going to see that top 4 is going to move around. Top 10, we'll keep feeding it to you every week. But, man, we're exhausted. It's 4 in the morning. We're trying to get this show done before tomorrow's fantasy football. It's hard to really put into words the experience of Califield. Yeah. One of the truly special places that I've been in college football. Everything's first rate, from parking to get to the stadium to the organization. Big shout out, love and respect to Mark Robinson with Texas A&M, who puts together everything on the production side. And he is on the staff there, and he does a tremendous job. And a lot of love and respect to Coach Fisher. Yeah. Just for remembering, some guys that he used to work with, and the guy he used to coach, and hooking us up and showing him how he's doing it here in Aggie Land in College Station. So we're going to sign off for now. This is Mike and Rico bringing you college football. Week 3 is in the books. Things are starting to shake out. I'm looking forward to week 4, and we're going to see what we've got. We are right at 58 minutes, short of an hour. Our eyes managed to stay open. We managed to stay awake. And we're going to sign off now. We're going to see you soon. Look for some content coming here. We'll do a fantasy football week 2 review. We've got a rivalry week for Justice League. We'll get that to you. But absolutely stay blessed and enjoy, and we will be talking to you guys soon. Gig 'em. Still don't know what that means.